And today we have the most beautiful Heather Nichols with us. And also, if I can add, today is the season finale. It's the last episode of this season, and it's a complete honor to wrap it up with you, Heather. So, thank you
Yeah.
so much for being here and being willing to have this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. I love body.
And today's topic is feeding your body for the creation of a generative embodiment. So the first
I
time I met you,
love that.
so the first time I met you, which was I think last year in Delhi, the first thing that came to me, which was so loud, was of course your generosity of spirit, hedonism, your elegance, and your decadence, and just with your being. And of course it reflects with how you are with your body so much and with the way you eat. And I remember we were having this conversation at lunch where you were talking to us about how you've been exploring so much with food and how that actually brings out more with regards to humanoid embodiment. Can you say more, please?
Yeah. Well, and for those of you who don't like, where you're like, what's humanoid embodiment? It basically it's if you're somebody who is a seeker, you're different. And is my internet okay?
Yes.
Okay, I just got a little thing that said it was unstable. Um, uh, and a lot of times, like when we're that different, when we're looking for something different in the world and we're looking for something different in our lives, and we know that there's something much greater that is possible. It also, like, we also have a different body. It's like you're just a different kind of a person. And it's not about better or worse or anything, but just our bodies are different, and they don't require what we've been told that the rest of, like that the world requires. And if you look at that with any other area of life, it's like you don't you probably already know that you don't require, the same things as other people in other areas, right? And it's like that's true with our bodies as well. And our bodies, but we grow up with all this conditioning around food and 3 meals a day, and all the food groups, and but our bodies are really energy, space, and consciousness, and they're not as solid as we think they are. They're not this solid mass that you have to like feed and feed and feed and feed to, get it to be healthy and survive and all of that. They actually thrive on space, they thrive on nature, they thrive on energy. And when we start acknowledging that about our bodies and treating them with regard, basically honoring them for what they actually are and what they actually can be, it's amazing what can show up.
That's awesome. That is wonderful. And when was the first time you started to explore that there was actually a different way of feeding your body? Because for the
you know
longest time, we feed our body according to our taste buds.
right. Right. And I still I love really epic food. And I actually really, I that's pretty much all that I feed my body is food that's really yummy, but it's not just about my taste buds anymore. And it's more about like the energetics of, like how does my body actually feel when I eat this food, and what's this actually going to create? And I love the title of this, feeding your body for the creation of a generative embodiment. And a generative embodiment is like our body's actually generating themselves all the time from possibility, not aging. And I don't really, I mean, I have always had a point of view that my body can get greater every day, and I can use food to facilitate that. And so I don't, aging isn't really a thing for me. It's more actually like my body is so much greater and happier now than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Um, and and so food can be part of that. And for me, I actually have such a like history with food, um, because my body is extremely sensitive. So I've had a lot of like food allergies, and I did a lot of diets, and I did a lot of, like I was vegan, and then I was vegetarian, and then I started eating meat because my body was really asking for it. I had developed all these allergies, and then, paleo and raw. I've done like every diet that probably exists. And, and it was all actually, once I found access consciousness and I started playing with the body tools and conversations, I realized that it was because, my body doesn't always totally know what to do with food. Like I always had the sense that my body was like, what do you expect me to do with this? Um, and so I had to actually explore something different, because my body would get really unhappy when I would feed it something that it didn't actually desire. So there's been a blessing in that, of just like, oh, and now like if I eat one bite too many of really, really good food, I will be so uncomfortably full for 5 or 6 hours. I mean, my body's just like, nope. And so I'm grateful, because I really have to listen, and it's created so much for me to do that.
That's awesome. That's amazing. That's wonderful. And it's funny because how many of us eat food to stuff our quote unquote our emotions or our feelings? How many times do we eat our feelings so we don't have, so we can be unaware about what we're perceiving, knowing, and receiving? And how much of eating is actually, and drinking is, alcohol and drugs, is to shut our unconscious, to shut our awareness, our unconsciousness, and shrink it to such a small degree where you can't even find it, just so you can, like a coping mechanism, basically, to cope with your situations.
Yeah. Well, like I said, our bodies actually thrive on space, and that can be actually a very uncomfortable thing for people to have that degree of space. I have this class that I've done. I just did a telecall, 3-part telecall.
I love seeing your classes. The graphics are so beautiful. Every time they pop up on my wall, it's just, oh, the energy is out of the world.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I did this class. It was a few weeks ago. It was called Eating for Space. Um, and because that's something that, people are like, what, don't you eat to be full? Don't you eat because you're hungry and then you want to be full? Like, you don't want space because that's hunger, and that's bad. And it was like this really cool exploration of humanoid bodies. But it was like, I started looking at that, like, why am I actually eating? How am I using food that is like, what if I used food in a generative way? And part of that is also just the enjoyment of it, like really giving our bodies and ourselves the enjoyment of living. And so it's not about depriving yourself, but it's doing it from the space of like giving yourself this generative experience, and not going, well, I'm uncomfortable right now, so I'm going to eat, or I'm distracted, so I'm going to eat, or I'm bored, so I'm going to eat. I mean, if you look at that, it's like abuse of our bodies with food. How much do we abuse our bodies with food because we don't want the awareness that we have, or we don't want the discomfort that we have, or we've stepped into a new level of space and we don't want that, because that makes you really different from the rest of the world. And so we use food to, do all these things that is this abuse of our bodies, rather than like actually using it for the creation of a generative embodiment.
Yeah, and when we talk about a generative embodiment, it's so much about coming in communion with the earth.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's almost like every time we stuff ourselves with um, extra food or something that actually is degenerative and destructive, we actually take ourselves away from what is actually possible with being truly with the creation and generation with the earth, and actually moving with uh, moving at the speed that's actually possible with the earth.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, food comes from the earth, and it's part of our, I mean, it's part of like the whole way that our bodies work with the planet and be with the planet, and the way that the planet, I mean, I would say it's one of the many ways that the planet nurtures our bodies, and a lot of people might think it's the way, but there's a lot of things that the earth contributes to our bodies that we don't acknowledge because it's energetic, it's not measurable. But if your body is, basically part of the earth, like an extension in a way, that's kind of a weird word, but like, what if our bodies are actually part of the earth? And it, like, so then it's like, if you kind of get a bigger sense of like all bodies and the communion of bodies and the communion with the earth, it's like, it's such a, like, the way that you are with your own body has such a, it can really like contribute to the devolution and the destruction of bodies and the earth. And it can also, how you are with your body can also expand the possibilities and the evolution. I mean, because we're like, people don't think about this, but we're evolving. Like the earth has always been in a process of evolution, and that doesn't stop with us. Like, just because humans or people or whatever you want to call us, humanoid, human, just because we're here and we think we've gotten it right, which is, a story for another time, but it's like, we don't, we like, evolution is not it's a force that cannot be stopped, and we're part of it. We are evolving. And Zach Bush is somebody who talks a lot about this, some really brilliant stuff about, how we are part of evolution, and we actually might be heading into extinction, because of what's happening with our bodies and the earth and all of this. But what would it be like if we put ourselves into the conversation of that, and we put our bodies into the conversation of that, and we acknowledge that we can actually influence the direction of evolution through our choices and our honoring of our bodies, and being with our bodies, and recognizing that our bodies change every day. They're different from other bodies, and there's like these amazing bodies, which also go beyond just what this is, are this evolutionary possibility, and the only way that we can access that is by being in question, because that's where we get the awareness of what could I create with my body today that I've never created before, and I love that. Like, to me, that's such a fun playground to explore, because our bodies actually, ultimately, our bodies are far more kind to us than we are to them, and they're willing to play, and they're willing to heal and change, and contribute, and they know so much about creation, and but if you are in basically an abusive relationship with your body, through judgment, through food, through all the things that you do and put in it and on it and all of that, there's this treasure trove of possibility and like evolutionary greatness, that you basically are walking around with every day, ignoring and being, like disavowing. And that is,
Wow.
that's like, what else is possible?
I love the energy you just brought up about abuse with your body, even with judgments.
Oh
So,
yeah.
so do you think we can melt our judgments that we have about our body with food? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, I would say, well, part of it is also getting out of judgment of food, because
Right.
judgment is such a huge part of feeding bodies on the planet. It's like and a lot of times people think of judgment as the like the negative judgments or whatever, but judgment is broccoli is good for me. And so I'm going to eat broccoli because it's good for me. Well, okay, hold on a second. Is your body asking for that right now? Or is like, or would something else contribute to your body right now? Um, and so that's also part of, how like, and, what I mean, there's a whole exploration there, um, but when you feed your body based on 3 meals a day or the food groups or the nutritional, whatever, and like there's no question there. And so that is, that's a diminishment of our bodies. It's a dishonoring of our bodies. And and but when we don't, when you start to change that and you start to go to question and you see nothing is bad. I mean, before I found access consciousness, I was like, sugar is bad and I think I have candida because I crave it all the time. And like a lot of us have been through our different journeys with food. And and you know and I did all these diets. It was like the raw and the paleo and the vegan and the vegetarian, and for me there was judgment with all of it. And it was like trying to get my body right with food. Um and once I was like, well, like Coca-Cola isn't bad, and sugar isn't bad, and I'm not wrong if I crave it, and it doesn't mean that I'm sick if I crave it. It actually means that I have a very active brain. And sometimes it is a Coke rather than broccoli. But if I don't have judgment about, if it's like everything can be a contribution, period, but everything can be a contribution to my body, um, depending on what's going on and the energy and all of that, then I start to actually create this like relation, like a different, well, I would say like a communion with my body that is like this totally different possibility. And so it's like, so what we choose and how we are with our bodies, that's part of that melting of the judgments, is going, okay, I'm not actually going to function from the form and the structure of bodies on the planet. I'm actually going to function from the communion with my body and the being present with it and the questions and the choices that I have, that I'm willing to make, that don't make sense to anybody else, but this is my body and I get to choose, and that is like, that's a really generative space, because then it's like our bodies get happier and more and happier and more. And that's, to me, how our bodies can become greater every day, and the world and the earth. And
Yeah.
because the less judgment we have about everything, the more possibility there is.
Yeah. And the thing about happier is how many times when we separate from our bodies, whether it's a coping mechanism by eating more or eating less, some people have the thing of completely going off food.
Mm.
um, how many times do we, how many times is it that exact thing that creates sadness, depression, anxiety, which is almost like you depriving yourself and your body of what it requires and what
Yeah.
it's asking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you looked at your body, like how would you treat a newborn baby? Like
Yeah.
most people would really be present with it and care for. I mean, babies have an amazing gift of bringing us into presence. And we would care for it and we would make sure it was fed and warm and dry and and that it had what it required, not from form and structure, but actually from the communication with the baby. And it's like, what if we were like that with our bodies? And more, and like, what if that was a starting point? Because there's so much, there's universes available here, but just to actually be like, hey, because your body is an organism of consciousness. It has a consciousness of its own. And that's one of the greatest gifts of our bodies, but we're like, I need to manage you and I need to control you and I need to like manage you out of sickness and like out of death and but there isn't, it's like staving off problems and handling the problem of our bodies rather than going, oh wow, this is, I have like my very own like consciousness, like totally conscious organism, like right here. And
Yeah.
it's like with me all the time. And what can we create today? It's just so different.
Yeah. That is so cool. That's amazing. Wow. Oh, I love how time has just flown by in this
Yeah.
conversation, which is wonderful. And I think it's time for us to wrap up now. So, is there anything you'd like to say? Anything last that you'd like to share?
I would just say, like, what if your body actually is, what if it's not a problem? Like, what if it's actually something that could contribute to you, your life, your living, your reality, your business, your money flows, everything in ways that you can't even imagine. And it's about like getting like actually having kindness with your body and yourself that is where you can begin to really create something different with it and to actually receive the gift that it is. It is, our bodies are such a gift, even if you have pain, even if you have health problems, even if you have, like, all of that is information, all of that is awareness. And when you stop fighting your body and going, okay, what's actually possible here if I were to actually listen, um, it's a whole it's a whole new universe of possibilities in every area of your life. And it's like, we're cute but we're not always bright. And we
Yeah,
are like
I know that.
ignoring this thing that's like, I got lots of awareness. And you're like, no, I've got this. So what if you could flip the switch and actually start to play with a different reality.
Yeah. Wow. And I know you do have lots of classes where you talk about food and drinks. So if do you have anything coming up where people can find you?
Yeah, I have a sex and bodies class actually coming up in, gosh, a couple weeks, I guess. And it's actually going to be right after an X-Men class, which is a whole amazing. I love talking about X-Men and bodies. And sex is a very fun topic for me as well. Not so much a Facebook topic, but yeah, so that's coming up in January. That'll be a Zoom call. Really cool conversations about what's actually possible with us with pleasure and sex and our bodies, from this space. It's really, really cool. And then other stuff coming all the time. Yeah.
Amazing. Wonderful. Ah, Well, this has been amazingly fun. Thank you so much once again.
Thank
And thank you to everyone who joined us and who is going to join us in the future. And I hope
you.
this has been a huge contribution to each one of you.
Mhm.
And with this episode, it's a wrap for this season. And I hope each episode has shown you something different and invited some different possibility into your world. Yeah. And how does it get better?
Oh, doesn't it? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.